That's okay.
You can hear me. You can hear me properly and clear.
We can hear you very well, and the image is fantastic. So
wonderful.
Take it away. The floor is yours.
So first of all, welcome to everyone. We are in Schloss Hollenegg. Schloss Hollenegg is in Steiermark, Styria. We're just an hour from Graz. So we're in the southern part of Austria, and we're quite close to the border with Slovenia. Behind me, you can see the Renaissance courtyard of Schloss Hollenegg. The first mention of the castle was 1163, and it was built over the following 800 years. So basically every owner added something to it. And we've been having here since 6 years design exhibitions in which contemporary designers present their recent work in conversation with the historical pieces of the castle. So this year we have Earth and Fire. The idea of this year's exhibition was to present a selection of ceramics. We have 23 designers exhibiting, and each piece is being put next to a historical piece of the collection, which we have here in Hollenegg. And some of the pieces are museum standard pieces, and some of them are more mundane, frivolous objects, which clearly had a special affection meaning. So it's interesting to compare the objects and start thinking about the stories that are behind it. And we'll start the tour now, and we'll be going first of all in the big Saal. That used to be, until the 19th century, actually the dining room. It is now very rarely used, but it's still a place where occasionally we have guests and parties. And then rooms we will be seeing are actually rooms which are not normally used and are normally close to the public. So Hollenegg is still very much a private home. It's where I spent a lot of time with my family. It's been in my husband's family for the past 200 years. So we'll go down and you'll have a view of the courtyard in the meantime. So we are now in the Saal, and as you can see, it's a very large room, and it's entirely frescoed, and on the ceiling as well. And the colors are incredibly bright, considering that it was first painted in 1750, and it was restored in 1885. And our first design piece here is Aryun Lee. She is Korean living in Germany, and she's made these 3 shapes especially for this exhibition, and they are sort of funny objects resembling a little bit an aubergine or some kind of fruit. And their idea is really to create this idea of taste, something pungent, something bitter, something sweet. And just above them, we have 3 objects which belong to the collection of Ludmilla. She was my husband's grandmother, and she collected all these funny terrines, which are in the shape of fruit and vegetables. Here, instead, we have a stool called Vilma by Reinaldo Sanguino. Reinaldo is a designer from Venezuela living in New York, and he creates these small chairs and stools out of solid ceramics. And he's very much inspired on one side by the Baroque, and on the other side by graffiti type of work. So it's very popping, and it's a good representation also of the dynamism of life in New York. And here we have paired them with 2 Chinese vases of the Familie Wehr. And I think what is extraordinary is that it really looks like this could be not just a stool, but actually a throne for a Chinese emperor. And here we have a project by Maria Scharl. Maria is an Austrian designer. She overuses the color pink as a kind of feminine empowerment. She's very much about feminism. And here she has created these tagines. So tagines are cooking cooking ceramics used in Morocco to serve, but also to cook food. And these are two representations of two mythological goddesses, which are at the same time sisters and at war with each other. And next to them, we have again, here we have a very dainty, detailed object, which could be described as extremely feminine. And on the other side, we have a terrine with a bird, which seems to be a little bit fighting with a snake.
Alice, can you
Yes.
go a little bit more in detail on how you did the pairing between the family objects and?
Yes, sure. So, I mean, the things that you've seen so far, a lot of it was very much about intuition, like what fits well, what is telling a story. And for me, it was always an excuse to really bring out something about, you know, how a ceramic is made, or to discover the origin of a piece. And actually, all the pairings, I did them together with Reinhard Franz, who is the curator of ceramics and glass at the MAC. This is the Museum for Applied Arts in Vienna. So some pairings are more about the shape, some of them are more about color, some of them are about the functionality of the object or the materiality, how they were made, what is the process. But they were very free associations, and it's just more of an excuse. It's like putting two people at the dinner table and hoping that they'll interact and have an interesting conversation and what comes out of it. So it's just an excuse to compare objects. I think it's a much easier, if you don't know a lot about a subject, to see something if you have next to it something which is very different. So, you know, you recognize matte because you can see shiny, and you appreciate color because maybe an object is monochromatic. And that's a little bit the exercise that we've done. But I think it will be more obvious as we go along as well.
Thank you.
So for example, these are two, is a Dutch designer, and she has taken a very classical Chinese vase shape. And here you can see an old Chinese vase, and you can really see how, you know, they have these very elongated bodies and these very much smaller and thinner necks. And what she's done, it's actually a very social work, in the sense that she has analyzed the transport of Chinese ware. So back in the 17th and the 18th century, a very, very large amount of Chinese ware, porcelains and vases, was brought from Asia to feed the fashion for Chinese objects. And these vases were extremely expensive, of course, because they had been on the sea for several months, and it was a very perilous journey. Nowadays, transport obviously has become extremely cheap. So there are hundreds of cargo ships crossing the seas, bringing objects which don't have any value or are very, very cheap in value. So what Sam has done is actually each of these vases represents a different cargo ship, and the color, this gray color, is actually what's also really funny, that she sent a vase which got lost on the way here, and the cargo ship which was represented on that vase is the same cargo ship which got stuck in the Suez Canal. And this was at approximately the same time. So we were having this conversation about the Suez Canal and the cargo ship which was lost between, which DHL had lost between the Netherlands and Austria.
But surely didn't go through the Suez Canal.
No. But it was just a very funny coincidence that it was exactly that cargo ship on the vase. So here we have a work by Babette Wieczorek, sorry. She is a Polish, of Polish origin, German designer, And these vases are made with 3D printing. So I'm sure most of you are aware that how 3D printing works, but most people don't realize that you can actually, instead of any kind of plastic, you can also use ceramic. And once the object is formed, you can burn it, fire it, and glaze it just like very normal ceramics. And these pieces she made it especially for the exhibition, because we looked at the vases that you can see now in the background, which are classic blue-white Chinese vases. Blue is a very common color in porcelain because it's a glazing which is extremely stable. It's cobalt, and you know what the result will come. There are a lot of glazes, like for example red and pink glazes, where you never know what the outcome will really be. So it's a kind of like the starting point of glazing, to be looking at blue on white. And here we have two objects by Studio Furthermore. They look like they're made out of sponge. So what they have done, actually, this is a studio based in London, and they create these shapes with sponges, and then they dip them in Persian, which is a very fine, very liquid type of ceramic, of clay. And once they fire the pieces, the sponge which is inside it completely burns out, and what remains is this ceramic object which has the same optic effect of a sponge. And next to these two objects, we have a pot and a plate, which are from Spain. So they are Moorish, actually. And it's interesting because they have this glaze, which is called lustre, which is a kind of metallic looking glaze. And so for Muslim people, it was forbidden to be eating from silver or metal plates or gold plates. That was a Christian thing. The Muslims had to eat from porcelain or ceramics, well, ceramics at the time. So they kind of copied the idea of metal by giving their ceramics this kind of lustre glazing, this different finish.
Mm-hmm. Could we have a little look around the room before we leave?
Yes, of course, we'll do that as well.
Thank you.
So here we have, if you can see, we have a large mirror, and on this mirror there are several vases, and this is a very typical way of presenting ceramics and porcelains from the 18th century. So this was like showing off the collection, and it was a way of presenting also and a bit of a status symbol. So this is how, you know, it would have been presented in a room. And here we have three objects, which are three Chinese vases, which are mounted with bronze finishes. So they have bronze vases, a rim on the top, and two handles. And these are called mounted porcelains. So the metal work would have been done in Europe once the vases would have arrived, to make it more appealing to Western taste. And we have paired them here with three works from Carl Monius. He is a Danish designer, and he creates these very tough earthenware, which kind of look very primitive in their look. They're kind of like very strong, very heavy shapes. But then what he does is he decorates them and creates these handles from climbing rope, which is something extremely modern and contemporary, very fashionable, because everyone is into climbing nowadays. And so in a way, it's again adapting something from a different era to our contemporary tastes. And I think here on this side, you can see it again very well. Again, we have two vases from Carl Monius with this very bright rope. And in the middle, we have two Chinese vases. No, sorry, this is Imari porcelain. Forgive me, this is Japanese Imari porcelain. We have these two vases which have been mounted together to form one shape with this bronze metal work as a base and as handles. And yes, tell me.
Alice, Yes, there were a couple of questions, so maybe I think now is a good time.
Yes.
How did you select the artists? Are they part of the residency program that you offer, or was it a competition? How did you select them?
Yeah, so this year it was slightly different from the past years, because we weren't really sure if we were able to open, and it was all a bit difficult due to COVID. So this year we don't actually have any designers in residence in the exhibition. The designers in residence that we had last summer are working towards the exhibition, which will be presented in 2022. So these are all designers which I've been following. Some of them I've been working with already. Some of them are designers that I've discovered through the exhibition. They are all young and emerging, so to speak. So most of them will be under 35. And most of the works here were already made. So it was a fairly quick exhibition to put together, simply because until January, we really weren't sure what the situation was. And basically until end of April, we didn't even know if we were going to be able to open. So it's worked out very well, and we've had amazing number of visitors. So I think people are really ready to get out and experience beauty again, and be surrounded by other people and be present in exhibitions.
And the residents that you offer, that is a selection process, and they come and live at the castle or near in the village, and then do they work at a studio in the castle? Is that how it works?
So the residency, they are invited, they spend here between 2 and 3 weeks, and it's mainly conceptual. So we don't actually have a studio where they really produce the work. So it's more about having the opportunity of spending time in the castle, being inspired by the space, having a mentorship. So we spend a lot of time discussing their ideas, going through the history of the place, and for them to really get an idea and then develop it further. When they leave, they have a clear idea of what they will be doing, but then the real work of making happens either with a partner, with a company, or in their own studios in their own time. So what I like to say is that actually the residency is a mentorship program for a whole year, because then between the time they come and the time that the exhibition happens, it's usually a year that has gone by.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
Okay,
we'll
go.
Is it painted wallpaper that I see on the wall? Can we have a little sneak?
Yeah, we'll do a little tour now, just very slowly of the room, so no one gets seasick. But it's actually painted silk on the walls.
And it's from what?
So this will be from, this will be the 18th century.
18th century. And was it locally made or imported from somewhere?
No. It was imported from China.
Right.
So this is Chinese silk.
Right. And this is, we just passed a ceramic stove, is that right?
Yes. So we'll be seeing more stoves upstairs. There's a stove of this kind in every room in the castle, but I'll be talking a little bit about stoves afterwards, because we have one room upstairs where the pieces are actually in conversation with the stove. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that.
Great.
Okay, so we'll go out and go into the next room now.
This is divine. It's incredible.
Yes, it's in full growth right now. So now we are entering a very old bathroom. This was the bathroom of Princess Henriette. She lived here in Hollenegg from 1865 approximately till her death, which was, if I'm not mistaken, 1908 or 1910. No, much later. The man, sorry, 38. Oh, sorry, her husband died in 1910 and she died in 1938. I have a very knowledgeable cameraman right now. So this was her bathroom, and if you come over, you can see her spectacular bathtub. which would have been made in approximately 1880. So the fittings are from England and the tiles would have been from Bohemia. And in the bathtub, we have this explosive object by Misha Khan, who is an American designer. And this was courtesy of Friedman Bender, who's this gallery, who kindly lent it to us. And it's actually meant to be a clock. So you see two little silver bits, which actually rotate. But what I think it really is representing, it's a kind of Big Bang explosion. And what he does is actually, this ceramic pieces, they're not fired. So they're called greenware because it dries so much that it actually becomes fairly robust. And then what he does is with a flaming torch, he then kind of fires it without a kiln, but with a firing torch. And then he applies color, powder coating it. So it's a really interesting and totally unorthodox way of doing any kind of ceramic. And I think it's very powerful. And it's called It's Time to Wake Up Ghislaine. So I felt it was quite fitting for Ludmila's bathroom, because the story goes that her maid lived just below the bathroom, would come up, fill the bath, and then knock on her door and say, "It's time to have your bath." So we'll now move on. Library, and we are in the tower. There's two towers in Hollenegg, which were probably built around the 14th century, during the 14th century, and this one is the north west tower. And you can see on the ceiling in a neo-Gothic style, so at the end of the 19th century, the Liechtenstein painted a family tree dating back to the Middle Ages. And here we have two works by Sarah Pschorn. She's a German ceramic artist, and she has made these two kind of collage, in the sense that she uses different techniques, molds and assemblage, and then she adds her own kind of shapes to it. And she often uses kind of very classical mythological shapes. So one of them is actually a Medusa. And next to it, we have here a white piece. It's a mantelpiece, centerpiece by Nymphenburg with putties. And again, this is again a completely different kind of mythological representation. But obviously putti and Greek mythology, they all kind of live together in the castle. And what's actually interesting is that this is the only white ceramic piece. So most of the pieces in Hollenegg are extremely colorful. And this is one of the only one that I found, which is all white. And here we have 4 objects by Theresa Berger. She's an Austrian designer, and what she's done is she's done these 4 shapes which are inspired by the coral reef. And hers is a commentary on climate change, because what is happening is that due to the rising temperature of the sea, the corals are losing some of their color and they're dying out. So that what actually happens is that the coral, from being very bright and lively and alive, looks very much like ceramics or clay, and also a bit like bones. So this is her kind of representation of what's happening. So there's a colorful part, and then there's this kind of dead whiteness of it as well. Okay, we'll have a little walk now. We're going into the next room. Wait, these ones. So here on the 2 sides, we have several plates. We have some old plates. We have some Imari Japanese plates. Imari porcelain is porcelain which has a blue underglaze, and then it has red and gold and sometimes black as an overglaze. And next to them, we have 3 plates by Actua Aparicio. She's a Spanish designer living in London, and she spent some time last year in China, in the capital for ceramics and porcelain making. And she took these plates, which are kind of very cheap, everyday plates with kind of mottos and proverbs on them. And she created this glass glazing on top. And she's used, obviously, the emoji language, which is a kind of extremely contemporary way of communicating. And she's applied this kind of new layer on this very old Chinese proverb, so that in some places you can't even read what the proverb is anyway. Not that I know Chinese, but I think it's a nice way of combining something which is mass produced and kind of traditional with something which is extremely contemporary and very much handmade. So this is a little bit of a sketchbook. This is a model by Marie Jansen of a very large, of what will be a very large shell, abalone shell. She is making right now, just outside Hollenegg in the woods, a large, very, very large piece of ceramic, which is going to be a fountain. So here you can see a kind of a rendering. And what she's doing is she's actually building the kiln around this one piece of ceramic and firing it on place. So we're very exciting because now it's in the process of drying up. And in July, we'll have the first firing. And if everything goes well, we'll have a second firing in September with the glazing. And after that, this very large abalone shell will remain here in Hollenegg and will be a piece of public art. So anyone will be able to enjoy the fountain. And Marie has been in residence for 2 months now, as she's been building this. And here there are some glazes. So she's been doing a lot of glaze trials and trying out different colors. And during all this time that she's been here, what's most impressive and amazing is that she's actually pregnant. So between the first and the second firing, in the meantime, she'll be having a baby. So we've all been talking about having a christening of a baby in the abalone shell.
Where is the material that she's using? Where is it coming from? Is it local to the castle?
No, it isn't. It isn't. We tried to have someone local provide the material, but actually it didn't work out. So she's provided her material because she's done very large objects before. So to be perfectly honest, I don't know where it's coming from, but I'll find out for you. So here we have 6 blocks, so to speak, by Eric Haugsby, and they are all made with different kinds of clay. So Eric is actually from Michigan, and he's been working in Vienna. And what he does is he actually digs his own earth from locations in and around Vienna, which is our kind of kept secret, because obviously what he's doing is just like he's removing earth. One of them is actually apparently in Karlsplatz, which is very much in the center of Vienna, where there was for a long time a construction site. And these, you can always see there's always the raw material, and then you can have the fired material. And this is a kind of completely minimalist approach, but what he really wants to show is what the material is and how actually incredibly simple it is, and how very unspectacular it is until obviously you form it and you shape it and you glaze it.
The structure on which all these pieces are resting is incorporated in the corridor?
Yes. So this is actually one of the very first projects from a designer in residence. This is the shelving system by Dean Brown, which he made in 2016. and it's inspired, it was made for this room, so that's why it frames so beautifully the late Renaissance wooden door, and all the shelves are in the same shape as some of the window panes. And it was really made for this space to showcase design objects. Okay, we'll go upstairs. Sorry.
And
yes.
this area, I mean, the castle is never open to the public except for a few days a year when you have the exhibit, correct?
Yes, that's correct, exactly. So we only open in May when we have the exhibition.
How many rooms do you have in the castle, Alice?
I think there's about 50, but it's a little bit of a debate whether we count the cellars and or not. So we're always having a discussion about that.
And the art that you live with, do you store it at any time, or is it always around? Or do you change it around? How do you live with all the art that is in the castle?
So most things stay exactly where they are. I actually get in a lot of trouble with my husband when I try and move things around, because I think it might be more appropriate to have something in a different place, and he notices immediately. So we try and keep things. It's an interesting mix between trying to make it look like it's still lived in and it's not just a museum, but also trying and keeping the spirit of the place. So there are certain, I always find it's really interesting the way that the interior design is done and how furniture is displayed. So there are certain things that I would never try and do because I want to preserve the spirit of the place. But then every so often you feel like, okay, we need to bring something new, because otherwise it's going to feel like too much like a museum. So now we're here in the winter dining room, and this room is dedicated to Augarten. Augarten has taken over the Kaiserlich Porzellanmanufaktur, which was the second porcelain factory in Europe after Meissen. So it has a very long tradition, a very long history, and Augarten is still producing some of the patterns and some of the shapes which the Kaiserlich Porzellanmanufaktur had developed. And so here we have a table with plates. Some of them are old, some of them are new. And then on my right-hand side, we have a beautiful vase from the 18th century with flowers and a parrot on top and a kind of lattice pattern. And on the other side of the room, we have two candlesticks, which are made by Barbara Palatin, their contemporary, and a contemporary sculpture as well. And here again, it's to show the amazing technique and the amazing work that Augarten is capable of doing. And it's interesting to see, you know, the difference between glazing and biscuit porcelain.
Can we come a little, here we go, a little closer to that piece, which is so beautiful. Thank you.
And now we are above the library. So again, we have a rounded room. And this is a room where we have, well, we've always had a lot of ceramic pieces. We have a very large glass vitrine at the back of the room with tea services from Augarten and Meissen and different ceramic and porcelain objects. And then we have here, so I'll just let you have a look around. So here we have a project by Unfold. They are Belgian designers. No, this is not the project. So these are 6 teapots, and they are all 3D printed. And the idea behind this project was that The first teapot, which is the one on the extreme right, the very more simple, let's say, white teapot, was the inspiration. That was sent to the next designer, and the next designer developed a new teapot inspired from the first one, and so on and so on. So that each one was inspired by a previous one. And what's interesting is that the teapots went from, each one of them sent the teapot to the West, always the West. So the first teapot was made in England, then we had East Coast in the States, West Coast in the States, there was Singapore, and the last teapot was, then there was Israel and Turkey, Israel, and then back to Europe. And the teapot has always been a very kind of inventive object. It's always been a way of creating interesting shapes. So as we were seeing before, here we have a teapot that looks like it's inspired by lemons. It's a Vietri ceramic from Italy. And here on this sideboard, we have different shapes of teapots and coffee pots. And it's always a very creative element in every tea service. So we are now in one of the Gobelins. Gobelins are very large Belgian tapestries. And these rooms are all in the neo-Gothic style, and they were redecorated by the Liechtenstein. And in the corner, you can see one of these very large stoves. This is a late Renaissance stove from the 16th century. And what's interesting is that these stoves were all heated from the outside, and they're extremely complex inside because they were really made so that the heat would hold for as long as possible and that you would need as little wood as possible. So once they were heated, once they were, the wood inside it was burned, the heat could hold from 7 till 12 hours. So a pretty fairly long time. And obviously the great advantage is that you could sit extremely close and you could touch the tiles without burning yourself. And these are an extremely beautiful green. And here in the foreground, we have 3 green vases by Floris Wubben. He is a Dutch designer who has created a kind of extrusion machine, which is a machine to make very industrial ceramic. And he has built his own profiles so that he actually presses the ceramic through this machine and through the profiles, and he creates these vases which are nothing industrial because they have all their kind of peculiarities and a very kind of human touch to them. So again, it's this kind of like comparison between making something very large or making something very small with a machine, and the interesting idea between something which is extremely industrial and something which is handmade. And the stoves are also, you know, the tiles are industrially made, but then the stove would have been built by hand by someone who had a very kind of handcrafted work.
Alice, can I ask a question? Sorry, you mentioned that the tapestry that is hanging there is Gobelin from Belgium?
Yes, yes. These are Belgium Brussels tapestries. And
I thought the Gobelins were a French family. So is it a branch of the family or is it a technique? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think Gobelin is actually the word that it's used in Austria to describe any kind of tapestry. So it's not actually related to a specific style or a specific period. It's more just the word that it's used in German, Austrian to describe any kind of large tapestries. So these ones in specific are Brussels tapestry from the 1600s. And they are, there's 2 in this room, 3 in the next room, and 1 in the third room. And they all represent scenes from the life of Moses.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And here we have a kind of funny project, something very witty. So we have a viel Brustschal. So it's a many breast bowl, and we have a nose vase. These are projects by BNAG. They are a German collective, and they were developed for a hospital project about the body. So it was a way to do an art project within the hospital where the body was at the center, and to like realize that everybody is slightly different and the body can be something quite fun or funny. And next to it, we have a jug, a very large jug, which comes from Caltagirone, which is in Sicily, and it's very famous for its ceramics. And the most famous pieces in Caltagirone are the heads, and this is a kind of very funny take on the classical heads because it's a cyclops. So Polyphemus in the Odyssey, he only had one eye, and again it's this kind of like concentrating on the body. So there's a very large nose, the mouth, the eye, and the piece of furniture on which all these objects are placed is actually was actually used as a washing table. So here it would have been the water and the jug, and people would have washed here before bathrooms. So here we are in the second room, and as you can see, there are other tapestries here on the wall. There's actually 4 in this room. So, and this room is called very simply the Red Room. And here we have a project by Jessie Derogy. She's a French designer, and she also spent a certain amount of time in China working with porcelain. And she has here created a structure, which is a kind of like puzzle. And it's made of different pieces, all kind of joined together. And these pieces are inspired by the wooden pieces, which are under an classical Chinese architecture. And they are very colored. You can see an image here. So these are kind of like, sorry, this is actually the other way around. So that's better. So these shapes, she's taken them and added and kind of adapted them and made them in white porcelain. And the tray on top is to show that it has actually a structural function. And it's an interesting exercise about bringing architectural elements into this material. But what's also interesting is that here next to it, we have these dragons. This would have actually been placed this way. And this water dragon was placed on a roof on top of the Chinese building. And it would have been there to protect from evil spirits. So again, we see kind of the way that ceramic was included in the architecture and integrated in architecture. And here we have a piece by Catty Stout. She's an American designer, and this is a vase. But for her, the function is always just an excuse to create a very dynamic and very sculptural piece. And this vessel is created all with scrap material. So whatever she finds from clay that has just been discarded from another project, she kind of pieces together and creates these very dynamic shapes, which are extremely reminiscent of Baroque and Rococo in the way that they are so exuberant and bright and colorful. And in comparison, we have here on this side, we have again a Nymphenburg centerpiece. This is called the Halali group, the hunting group. So we have a huntress and a hunter and a little boy, and we have dogs and all sorts of incredible details about nature. And again, although these two pieces are extremely different in the way that one is more abstract and the other one is more representational, the kind of energy that they bring and the kind of attention to the detail and the curved shapes are very, very similar. So in a way, they're speaking almost the same language. And here we have a piece by Alice Walton. She's an English ceramic artist, and a lot of people have been asking me how are these pieces made, and she has a very painstaking technique, very detailed. She makes all these little pieces of ceramics individually and then kind of creates this sculpture. And it's incredibly poetic because she explains that she's inspired by architecture and nature at the same time. And if you look at these objects and kind of imagine it, she was inspired by the empty space underneath the arch of an aqueduct. So if you think of an aqueduct in nature, the arch underneath, it's the sky, it's filled with the sky, and obviously it's in a perspective. So these are the kind of the sky that you see through the aqueduct arches in the distance. And I think it's a beautiful image. And every time I look at them, now that I know, I think back to this idea. And I really like the way that she can really make us dream about something through these beautiful ceramic pieces.
We actually visited Alice in her studio about 6 weeks ago. We did.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, in April we did.
So you know all about how she makes the pieces.
Well, not all of us were on the trip, so.
Yeah. Okay, so we go out again now. So here we have two pieces. The one on the right-hand side is by Francesco Dejo, Studio Dejo, and it's a kind of small side table or bedside table, and on top of it there is a very anthropomorphic shaped cup, and he's working with a always terracotta colored clay. So on one side he has this very kind of like Italian traditional feel to it, and then on the other hand his shapes are very kind of wacky and anthropomorphic. So you always have the idea that, you know, this is some kind of animal coming to life. And next to it we have a temple drum, a decorative temple drum from Japan, Odaiko drum is called, and we have a very kind of like abstract object underneath, and then on top of it we have a rooster, and this rooster is a symbol of peace, and again it's this kind of like symbolic animal. So I think this is a kind of funny pairing of shapes and animals which have symbolic meaning. So Isabel, how are we doing with time? Because I'd like to take you now to see the church inside, because we have one last project in there.
Yes, we have
but
time.
I just wanted to make sure. Okay, perfect.
We
so we'll
time.
Just be going. Perfect. Okay.
So Alice, I think that you didn't grow up in a castle. How does one adjust to this kind of life?
Because I met my husband on a sailing holiday and he was a skipper. So I didn't really have much of an idea of what was expecting me. And it took me a really long time. I have to be honest. At first, I was very reluctant at the idea of moving into a castle. I'd always imagined myself living in a flat in a big city. So it takes a bit of getting used to. I think it was the moment that I realized that I could combine modern and old and antique. That's the time when I kind of felt, okay, I can deal with this. It was at the beginning, it was really hard to just imagine, how do I bring contemporary objects in such a large historical place? And I think that's where I'm not alone, and a lot of people feel that. So that what you actually see in most beautiful houses is either a very traditional, very historically based interior decoration, or something which is extremely contemporary. And I actually think when you do manage to combine the two, the results are just so much more exciting.
Mm-hmm. And you are an art historian or a curator by trade. This is how you trained. And
I'm actually, yes, I didn't study history of art at university. I actually studied design. Sorry, I'm looking now for the key. So this is what a Hollenegg is like. There are always keys hidden somewhere to open the church. I've actually studied interior architecture and specialized in exhibition design. So for a long time, I designed exhibitions, then I started producing them. And at some point I was like, well, actually, I really want to decide what's in the exhibition. And so about 8 years ago, I started developing the concept for exhibition. And yeah, I would say since then I've been a curator. So we are in the church. The church is in the second courtyard. And as you can see, it's not just like a chapel, it's a full-size church. And it's actually used from the months from May till October by the parish. So there's only about 2,000 people in Hollenegg, but we are actually very spoiled and have 3 churches that we can use in the parish. And in here we have 2 different projects by Onka Almayer-Beck. She's an Austrian designer, and she'd been dreaming of doing a project for a church. So when I invited her to exhibit, she was super excited. And the first piece that she made is this candle holder. And what she's done is she's taken a lot of small details. So for example, if you look here, we have an angel holding a sacred heart. And then she has also put the sacred heart on the candle holder. So she's really created something for this space. It's a very kind of contemporary object. It doesn't have like a kind of historical feel to it, but it has a lot of small details, which if you start looking are all around us. And then the second series of objects she made are completely the opposite. They're objects where you just wouldn't know where they come from and what they're for. And she really tried to make them that they kind of like fit in and kind of are inspired by the background. And the center one is with gold and silver glazing, and they look like they come from a different world or a different era. And they're all cups or cibornium, so for holding the holy body of Christ. And I think it's interesting because I always offer the church to the designers, and most of them are incredibly scared of doing something in here, although it could be very inspiring. And she's actually the first one in 6 years that has taken up the challenge.
What do the parishioners think about it?
I think they've kind of got used to the idea that I do every so often something crazy. No, most people are extremely happy to come and see. And what I really like is that most people come because they want to see the castle, and then they leave and they say, the castle is beautiful, but the objects are really interesting. So I can really see how in the past 6 years, they have grown to understand what we're doing here, and they get more and more excited every year. So they take a lot of time. There's a lot of people who spend 2 hours or come back the following weekend. So I think they have grown to understand the projects that we present. They like reading about them. They always ask questions, and we always try to have very well prepared people in the room to look after the objects, so that they can also provide information. And they love that. They really want to have a kind of conversation about what's going on. So I think now, if you probably have some more questions, so maybe we'll go upstairs and we can have a little chat to finish off.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. how do the children take to living in a place like that? I suppose they've never known anything else. So for them,
I always say my children are ruined for life, because obviously the moment that they go to a flat, they always feel like it's incredibly small. And so I always say, my God, you're going to be ruined for the rest of your life. I think they don't, in some ways, they don't really realize what it means to live in a castle. And I think that's good, because, you know, they kind of like, if they take it a little bit for granted, it means that they don't realize how privileged they are. So I think that in a way that's kind of healthy, because they just kind of like think, oh, it's a great place to play hide and seek. Yeah. Right. On the other hand, I actually noticed they're extremely aware of what it means to look after objects. So they're very good about not damaging things, not banging doors and that kind of thing. And I think they have a very good understanding of what something well made is and what something cheap or bad quality is. And I'm always amazed about that. And that's something that I value a lot. So I think that's something positive about growing up in this place. What I always notice is that obviously when you're here the whole time, you don't realize what a privilege it is. You always need people to come in and tell you, oh my God, this is so beautiful. And then suddenly you go, oh my God, it's true. And I'm so lucky to be here. Because obviously on an everyday, you just think of, you know, too many stairs and the work and the cleaning and the tidying up and the fact that the reception is bad. So I think it's nice to have people coming in, because that kind of gives you a feel, it just opens up your eyes again. You know, you kind of like realize, yes, this is really nice. So we're now in the more private part of the house. So this is where we actually spend our days. This is where we live. And as you probably can see behind me, around me, the rooms are still very large and very grand, but we have tried to make them look a little bit more homey. So this is, maybe we can just turn around and look. This is our living room, and this is hand-painted Chinese wallpaper on the walls, depicting birds and flowers and plants. There's not a lot of light, but I hope you can see it well enough.
Absolutely. It's thank you so much for welcoming us in your home. Is there a tradition of craft in the area where you live?
Not huge. No. Sorry. Give me a second, because I'll just turn around now the video, and then you can. Okay. Now you can see me well.
Thank you.
No, the area where we're in is an area of winemaking. And there's a lot of woodland for timber, and it's a fairly industrial area as well. So there isn't a lot of craft and a lot of fine arts. So that's not really the case in this area.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd love to open the microphone, and if anyone in the audience has questions, I bet Sally Ann has, because she's our artist in residence. She's a ceramicist, so I'm sure Sally Ann has questions. But anybody,
I hope I can answer them now. I'm a bit worried.
Hello, yes. If I could start by asking, what do you buy for your own area, your own quarters? What sort of work do you like?
That's always a really difficult one. So it's interesting, because a lot of the things that I choose or that come out of the designers in residency projects, they might not be what I would buy for myself. But then, because I know the history behind it, because I know the person behind it, I kind of love the pieces, and because they were made for the space, then they kind of like fit in beautifully, and I'm very happy with them. So actually, the designers in residence that we have, which are usually 3 or 4 every year, the copyright of the project stays with them, but the first prototype stays in Hollenegg. So I don't really go out and buy things. It's more about having the designers, getting them to do a work. It's a way of commissioning, and then these pieces stay here. But it's interesting because most of the time it's not something that I have picked or that I have fallen in love with. And I buy relatively few things because I love having them here for a while, but then after a few months I'm like, okay, I feel like I've enjoyed it, and then I kind of like send it on a new journey.
That's a really nice way. We're all about being patrons in the club, and that's a really nice way to do it. It's almost like paying it forward, and making it available to others. Did you have other questions, Sally?
Isabel, it's Anne.
Yes, Anne.
I'm interested, when you look forward 10 years, what would you like the outcome, the objectives to be accomplished with the studio and supporting artists and enabling their careers? What would your vision be?
Yeah, so I think it's there's more than one thing actually. So the one thing was to like create something new for Hollenegg. So there was a very practical reason. Every generation that has lived in Hollenegg has added something to it, in architectural terms, in terms of collection. So when it was our turn, it was like, okay, very nice to make a lift and to add a few bathrooms, but what are we really going to contribute to this place that it feels like we have done something for the space, for the place, for the castle? And since I've always worked in design, for me it was like obvious, okay, so let's bring in contemporary design, and that felt extremely relevant, and it felt like we were really adding something. So that was on a more personal level. The other thing which for me was important was to create a place where designers knew that they could, that they could come, that they could be hosted, and that is happening. So among young designers, they know about Schloss Hollenegg, and it's one of those places where they think that they can write or that they can come and visit. They feel that they have a voice here and they have a platform. So that makes me extremely happy, because we're really building a community. And then the third aim, which I didn't think about at the beginning, and I didn't really know about, and it's the one that I'm most proud about, is actually this idea that we are creating something exciting in the countryside. So most cultural events happen in big cities. Big cities have a lot of offerings. The moment you go and live in the countryside, it's all about the nature and the quiet, but people in the countryside have the same need for cultural stimuli as the people in the city. And that's what I am most interested about, is this idea of bringing things to places where maybe it's not 50,000 people seeing it, maybe it's only 5,000, but those 5,000 feel happy and feel privileged that they can, they have access to something which only people in the city do. And most of my visitors, when they first came to this first exhibition 6 years ago, had never been to a design museum. They didn't even know what design was or craft, and now they come every year and they appreciate it and they like it. And that makes me feel like I am achieving something. I'm on the way to achieving something.
Thank you so very much, and for
I have a quick question.
That was terrific.
I have a quick question, if I could.
Yes.
Sure. First of all, thank you for welcoming us into your home. It's incredible. An experience like that, it's really memorable. Ceramics, they're probably as old as humanity, I imagine. They started making ceramics so early in our history, and it used to be functional, things for cooking, for eating, and maybe developed into jewelry and things like that. Do you think there was a shift towards decorative more than utilitarian?
No, I think it's just that we take more attention for the decorative, and we kind of give for granted the utilitarian. Because we still eat from ceramics, and we still store a lot of food, and maybe we don't use ceramics for cooking in the Western civilized world, but a great majority of the world still uses ceramic pots. clay pots for preparing the food and carrying water. So I think it's just a question of how much attention we pay to it, and obviously we tend to like find more amazing and more interesting pieces which are beautiful and not necessarily functional. Yeah.
I
but
thought
I
you
think
had a beautiful balance of both in this exhibition. It was really interesting.
Oh, thank you. I'm very happy to hear that. Yeah. I mean, this is something which it was important to me to like show a little bit of the diversity. And that's why we also have, you know, very large and very small and 3D printed and different techniques, because I think it's we often don't realize how much you can do with it. And the other thing which I learned, which I didn't quite realize, is what an achievement every time it is, because it all looks very easy and kind of very beautiful, but it's actually it's fighting against the material that just wants to collapse on itself, and actually making something that holds up and that is resistant. So I think it's a real, every piece that comes out of the kiln which looks good and it's not broken, it's actually a little bit of magic in it, you know. It's a yeah, there's a little bit of
yeah, I do a little food photography. That's kind of my hobby, and everything is on ceramic, handmade ceramic plates, and everybody asks me, where did you get your props? And these are not props, these are my dinner plates. I always had to laugh when they asked that.
The props, yeah, that's a really, yeah, that's very funny. That's a nice word.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Marianne, do you have a question? You need to unmute yourself.
Not like me to not have my voice heard. Question. Alice.
Please.
Beautiful, beautiful environment. Lovely. So delighted to have been taken through. Thank you. I could have spent more time looking at the rooms as well, but we only have an hour. Question. You use ceramics for this particular visit this time and for this exhibition. Are there other art forms, craft art forms that you see hosting and having artists come in to do, or have you in the past?
No, well, in the past, the exhibitions that we've had in the past, they were more thematic. So we've had an exhibition about rituals at the table. We've had an exhibition about bringing wilderness in everyday life. We had an exhibition about change and legacy. So they were very wide thematics.
Well, I like that.
It was a way of like exploring the theme more than the specific craft.
I like that.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you.
That's very broad. I like that.
And this year it was, as I said, the ceramics was a good starting point, because we had so many time constraints and we just did not know how we were whether we were going to have an exhibition. But I've learned so much from it that I feel this is actually really interesting. I'd love to explore more textiles. I think weaving and fabrics, how fabrics are made, how rugs, textiles, that would be super interesting, especially because it's something that we all have rediscovered, because we are in such a kind of technological world that we need things which have a very kind of like a feel to it, a warmth to it. So I think that would be something which I'd be super interested in exploring.
One last question. Is the castle on an extensive amount of grounds, or is it contained within the walls, the grounds that you have? Because I want to ask about outdoor art and the idea of taking your interest to the grounds as well, like the shell fountain.
Yeah. We do have a part of a woodland next to us as well. So there is some grounds. It's more woodland than park. We have a bit of a garden, but we're also on one side, we're very much in the town. Well, it's not really a town because it's just houses, but we're very much in the middle of it. I'm not that much into the outdoors yet. I haven't started. I don't have a very green thumb, but my mom keeps on telling me that gardening grows on you and it comes with age. So I don't count it out, and I just wait for the time that this will blossom.
You need to come to Canada and discover what nature is.
Yeah, I know.
That's all we have here.
Yeah, I know, absolutely.
Any other question? Edie, sometimes you have questions, or anybody else? No?
Can I just ask about the fountain? I thought that was a wonderful thing. Had you got an idea already for a fountain, or was that something that the artist brought? And how did you develop the idea for that?
So Marie came to me. Someone sent her to me because they told her she was having a mentorship, and someone told her, you should go and visit Alice in Hollenegg and discuss with her. And she came to me, and she came with a ceramic stove project. And I said, Marie, this is beautiful, but I already have a ceramic stove in every single room, and I just can't do anything with it. Yeah. And then I just said, just keep throwing ideas at me. I really liked her. There was something about her which caught me completely, because she looks extremely young and fragile, and then she's got such a tough core, but in a very gentle way. And I just loved that combination. And I just said, just keep throwing ideas at me, and we'll see what comes out of it. And so a few months later, she sent me the first sketches of the fountain and this large abalone shell. And at the beginning, I didn't really know how to include it and how to do it. And then we had to postpone 1 year, and then suddenly it made perfect sense. And part of the exhibition was actually built around the fact that she was creating this fountain, because I thought, well, if we're going to be having this fountain in ceramic, then I want to know a bit more about ceramic. And then that's when I got interested, and that's when I decided to do the exhibition about ceramic. So she was definitely a very big part of this. But it was a very kind of slow process, and it was her idea. And then it turned out, I didn't know that at the beginning, but it turned out that she's been wanting to make this shell and a fountain for 6 or 7 years, and she just never had the right chance, the right opportunity, the right place to place it. And I mean, she's done an amazing job also of financing this. So obviously I've helped a lot, but I mean, she got together the big part of the money for it. So it's a wonderful project. We're very, very excited about it.
I hope you're going to be sharing photos of it when it's finished. And
yes,
that would be wonderful.
Absolutely,
wonderful.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
We're also doing a video of it, and we'll have a publication. And maybe that's something which is interesting for all of you to know as well, is we have a catalog of the exhibition, which actually it has arrived like an hour ago, and I haven't even seen it yet because I was like getting ready for all of you. But we have a catalog of the exhibition, and we always take a lot of care to always have a really nice publication after every exhibition. So that's something that, maybe it's interesting for all of you to know.
Sure, please send me the detail, and I will share with the club. We're going to take one last question. Marianne, I see that you raised your hand, but if anybody else has a question first, no? Okay, Marianne. Yeah, Marianne, go ahead. But you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I did it again. I wanted to ask you about the firing of the fountain. I have never heard of a piece being built and then you fire around it. Is this like Raku, where they build the fire over it?
Yes, it's a little bit like that. It's similar in the sense that you're building around it. So what they do is they really build a kiln around it, so that from the outside you're not going to see anything. It just looks like a big cube, and then you have a fire going for 24 hours. So what you're doing is for 24 hours you're just throwing wood inside, and firing the piece.
Thank you so much to all of you, and I don't know if you want to stay.
I'd also like to